Let's go ahead and bring in Nate Adams. He is a film critic. And Nate, what are you reporting on? Anything new out there other than Netflix?
Well, it's actually funny. So this week, there's a movie coming out on Friday. It's called Unhinged, and it stars Russell Crowe. And it is the first new major release that is hitting theaters since the theaters closed in March. Obviously, here in Michigan or in certain parts of Michigan, we don't have access to movie theaters. So you can go to a drive-in and see it. There are drive-ins across the state that are open. For me, some folks might not be that far away from Ohio. If they want to take like a 30-minute drive and go see it across the border, they can. So that's been the big movie that's coming out this week. And it's kind of noteworthy because, like I said, it is the first major release that's coming only to theaters and not like a streaming service since March.
I know production was halted. Some companies are trying to get back on the sets and start filming again, but how long do you think it's going to be before we're going to start seeing some solid new content come into, the streaming services or even the movie theaters?
Well, so there's been a lot of ruckus in the industry now because Christopher Nolan's new film Tenet is slated to come out on September 3rd here in the U.S. It's having a staggered international release starting next week, which for a movie on that scale, a big budget blockbuster, it just doesn't happen because of piracy or people will go online and spoil it. And Christopher Nolan's very secretive about his films. So that film is going to have a staggered rollout starting, like I said, next week. So I think that's going to be like the only big semblance of a big budget film that's going to come out for some time. As far as like production and stuff's ramping up, I think the best example that I can think of right now, Jurassic World Dominion, which is the sequel to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, has revamped production overseas, and they're implementing what the NBA is doing with the bubble. They rented out a hotel exclusively for cast and crew. People are getting rigorously screened around the clock for COVID-19. And so if more studios and Netflix and all these other companies can get that model, because that is the new normal, then I think maybe we'll start seeing new content sooner rather than later. I know FX just finished up shooting the last 2 episodes of Fargo, which was supposed to premiere back in April on FX, but now it's coming out at the end of September. So they were able to get some protocols going. So we are starting to see some sense of normalcy in the entertainment world as far as stuff coming out. But as far as big movies are concerned, a lot of the studios, Paramount Pictures just pushed Top Gun Maverick, A Quiet Place 2 all into 2021. As far as aside from Tenet, which I mentioned, the next big film, maybe Wonder Woman 1984 in October, but I have a strong inclination that probably will get pushed somewhere into 2021. That release calendar is becoming very, very cramped.
So, Nate, a lot of these movies being pushed into 2021 that are already in production or still need to wrap up the bulk of their photography and production work. But in terms of the future, 2022 and onward, the impact that the current times are having on these studios, particularly the middle market studios, not necessarily the large studios that have a significant sum of money to work with. What impact is this going to have on those productions? Are we going to see less movies coming out from some of the more independent productions in the future and more from and just more on a blockbuster level because of the financial hit of these times?
Yeah, so we're actually already starting to kind of see it now. Paramount Pictures, for example, has sold a bunch of their movies off to a streaming service for Netflix because they need that money on the books. So you're seeing like The Lovebirds, which is a Kumail Nanjiani comedy that was supposed to release in theaters that premiered on Netflix in May. There's an Aaron Sorkin drama called The Trial of the Chicago 7, which is a big buzzy Oscar project. They're not releasing that in theaters anymore. They're dumping it onto Netflix. I don't want to say dumping, but they sold it to Netflix. So these streamers are kind of relishing in the extra content. But what you're going to see, I think, in the future is right. You're going to only see those big budget tentpoles that are going to probably make it to theaters. You're going to see your Marvel films. The Marvel films are always going to be playing in theaters no matter what. And so those films will stick to that model. Disney is a very, very strong proponent of the theatrical model, even though Mulan here in a couple weeks is going to be premiering on Disney Plus exclusively for a $30 fee. I don't think that's going to become the new normal so much once people start going back to theaters. As far as 2022 goes, it's tough to say what this will have impact wise. But I have heard that you might see some studios become dissolved and under one roof. You're already kind of seeing it. Viacom and Warner Media is kind of absorbing all into one roof. And you hear the rumors about theaters that are filing for bankruptcy, AMC Theaters being one of them. So there's rumors also circling that maybe a studio comes in and purchase one of these theaters to save them from going into bankruptcy, and then all they do is just promote their content and play their movies. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. It's tough to say right now.
We're talking with Nate Adams. He is a film critic for Rotten Tomatoes and a member of the Detroit Film Critics Society. You're also a part of the website, theonlycritic.com. You guys have a podcast now?
We do have a podcast. It's called the Picks and Pans Podcast. We're each and every week we review the latest films that are hitting theaters, which right now is very minimal, and streaming. And we do feature interviews. Actually, a couple weeks ago, we interviewed Rob Savage, who actually directed a horror film that's now streaming on Shudder. It's called Host. And this was a film that was shot and made entirely in quarantine. The filmmakers never met with the actors, and they shot it over Zoom, and they pieced it together in quarantine. So, in fact, that kind of gives me hope a little bit that maybe there's some form of pandemic art that can come out of all of this. I'm not saying it'll stand the test of time, because who knows in 10 years if we go back and watch that film, the era that we were living in and how it was received then. But it was a very, very unique experience. So I highly recommend going and checking out the interview. It was a lot of fun.
So I would imagine a part of your job is to attend a lot of these junkets that they have for the movies. Do you see that anytime in your future, or are they going to just be Zoom from here on out?
Well, right now everything is digital, and I'm very fortunate that the studios, the things that are coming out, the Netflix, HBO Max, all these streaming services are kind of adapting with the times, and I'm still seeing 5 or 6, actually sometimes 7 movies a week. Like, if I wasn't seeing anything, I'd probably be going a little bit stir crazy, because it's my job and that's what I have to do. But they're going with the flow, and they're keeping things content coming to film reporters. And as far as those junkets are concerned, right, I'm doing a lot of Zoom interviews, and I think about that too, because when movies are opening and there's theaters that are open, they have press screenings and they invite a bunch of people. I imagine that can be pretty costly. So, and you hear a lot of the aftermath of the pandemic is that some places are not sending their employees back to work. They figured it's cheaper to have them work from home. So I hope screenings come back, because those are a lot of fun. It's a good environment, but I also can imagine that for the studios, it's cheaper to just send out the films to press to review them at home. But but like I said, nothing beats the big screen experience.
Right. There are some movies that you need to see in the theater, because it is a different experience. However, even before the COVID-19 crisis, we were already seeing people get more or subscribing more to Netflix and Hulu, and waiting for movies to come out on your home streaming services, because sometimes it's only like a few weeks, it seems like, after they hit the big theater that they're coming to your on-demand Netflix or whichever it is. Do you think the big screen movie theater will go away, or do you think it will survive this because people still want to see movies in that setting?
So movie going is the number one. It's like the number one leisure activity in the United States. Everybody goes to the movies because they love it. It's an escape. But what we're seeing is a lot of experimentation. Like I mentioned earlier, Mulan is heading to Disney Plus for $30, and you hear people saying $30 is kind of expensive, but for a family of 4, how much does it cost to take the children to the movie theater and to buy snacks and popcorn? I mean, yeah, you're paying for the experience, but I think it'd be a lot easier for some family members because of babysitters and whatnot, that they could just watch it at home. And so I think what you're going to see is, I don't think theaters will go away, but they're only going to be for those big films. Like the smaller scale films are just going to go straight to streaming. I was looking at a list of movies that came out 20 years ago in the year 2000, and I kind of went down the list. And like half of those films, you had The Perfect Storm, Scary Movie, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Aaron Brockovich, Meet the Parents. Those movies, half of those movies would not be released in theaters today. Like, long gone are the days when My Big Fat Greek Wedding comes out in 2002 and makes $160+ million at the box office. That's a movie that goes straight to streaming today. And AMC Theaters, I'm not sure if you guys heard, struck a deal with Universal Pictures that they're now limiting the theatrical window. Usually you had to wait 90 days for a movie to hit theaters, and then you could release it on home video. That's just an agreement that's been in place for the last 10 years. And AMC Theaters recently announced that they're crunching the window to 17 days. So now if, for example, a movie the Universal Picture releases like The King of Staten Island, that will play exclusively for 17 days, which is 2 weeks. And then on the 17th day, they can decide if they want to release it at home to audiences for a premium fee. Obviously, if a movie like, say, their Fast and Furious franchise is doing gangbusters at the box office, they're not going to be so inclined to release that one on streaming services. But it is we are seeing the future of what our content coming to us is going to look like for the consumer, and it's kind of been inevitable. There's been talks about this happening for a while, but the pandemic definitely accelerated those conversations.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the huge change in how people are watching movies and how they're even watching TV. I couldn't imagine trying to survive COVID-19, the first initial months and weeks of the lockdown, without these streaming services. And we have Xfinity On Demand, so that's also another revenue or avenue that you can view this stuff. Do you think the streaming services, is it going to continue to grow in popularity? Are there going to be more of them come the near future?
Yeah, so we're kind of wrapping up this end of, there's been a bunch of streaming content that came out within the last, streaming services that came out within the last 5 months. HBO Max launched, Apple TV Plus launched in November, Peacock just launched in July, Quibi launched in April. So we're kind of seeing the end of it. There's a rumor now that Paramount is starting their own streaming services. I mean, they do own CBS All Access, which is yet again another streaming services. But I think we're going to start seeing more cannibalization. But when you hear Disney on their earnings call a couple of weeks ago saying they now have 60+ million subscribers on Disney Plus when they just launched in November, it's just kind of like this is kind of the future. And Netflix too added 20+ million subscribers this year, when last year they were down 10 million subscribers. Obviously, those numbers are probably elevated due to the pandemic. But what you're going to see, I think, now the Mulan experiment's going to be interesting because it's going to be $30, and Disney is cutting out all the middlemen. It's not going on iTunes, their library, where they get a cut of the rental price. So if only 10 million people, I think, I saw a statistic, 10 million people pay the $30, Mulan makes its money back. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, too, as far as like where the next step in streaming goes. Because if Wonder Woman 1984 underperforms at the box office in October, what's stopping Warner Brothers from dropping it on HBO Max for a same $30 fee? And then does that become the new normal? Who knows?
Nate, just another couple minutes before we let you go. Nate Adams, he's a film critic at Rotten Tomatoes and a member of the Detroit Film Critics Society. You can also read more of his critiques on his website at theonlycritic.com. Nate, just a couple more minutes before we let you go, what are 3 movies that you suggest people should watch right now, and then in the future, 3 movies to be watching out for?
So 3 movies to definitely be watched out for, just in terms of scale and scope. One will be Tenet, because Christopher Nolan is my favorite filmmaker, and every time he makes a project, it's always an event, and it's always ambitious, and it's always something you've never seen before. Next week, Disney's actually releasing the long-delayed New Mutants into theaters. And that movie was originally supposed to come out in, I think, 2018, and it kept getting pushed around the release calendar. And I think finally Disney is just, they're thinking we're going to cut our losses and we're just gonna release it next week. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see as far as box office numbers goes. And then there's The Trial of the Chicago 7, which is coming on Netflix in October. It's a big buzzy Oscar film. It's from Aaron Sorkin, who is, he did A Few Good Men. He directed, he created The Newsroom on HBO. So that's going to be one of the top films to watch. As far as things to watch at home right now, we're not from a lack of content. Actually, one of the best films I've seen this year is now streaming on Apple TV Plus. It's called Boy State. It's a documentary about a convention that takes place in Texas, where hundreds of thousands of young teenagers from across the state gather, and they basically make up their own forms of government. They get divided into factions, federalists and nationalists, and they rise the ranks and they make their own government, which was a very, very fascinating character study and social experiment. Another thing, HBO Max just launched a show called Lovecraft Country, which premiered last week. It's very, very good. It ties in, special effects driven monsters, folklore, all that stuff with kind of the race tensions that are happening in America right now. I thought that was very, very good. And yeah.
I have to ask you, how many streaming services do you subscribe to? Do you have them all? And which one's the best in your opinion?
So I do have, I have HBO, I have Hulu, I have Amazon, I have Netflix, I have Disney. I'm pretty sure I have Showtime. There isn't a lot that I don't have access to. So a lot of people, I think when Disney Plus came out, they said, well, I'm going to get rid of Netflix, so I don't need Netflix anymore. And it's funny that Disney's more for families and children. I find myself consistently opening up Netflix more than I do anything else. So that just tells me that they are, to me, the better option because of, like I said, the original content that they're pumping out, the billions of dollars. I mean, they have $19 billion set aside in a programming budget every year. So that's how much money they're dumping into their slate. So you're always going to get not all of it's great, but for the most part, that's been consistent. HBO Max launched in May, which is an extension of HBO. It's like their HBO spinoff kind of thing. It's been very confusing with the branding, but HBO Max has a very, very, very good library of backlog content, like things that are older, like A Streetcar Named Desire. You got Cool Hand Luke, Gone with the Wind, Blazing Saddles, mixed in with a lot of the new stuff. Like I mentioned, Lovecraft Country. They did a revamp of Perry Mason that came out over the summer, which was really, really terrific. There isn't really a show that comes on HBO that I don't watch at least once. So I think HBO Max and Netflix are the two best options.
One of the things I wonder about is with all the streaming services and they're looking for original content now, what's it like behind the scenes for the filmmakers to try to shop their project around? Are they taking a screenplay and trying to go to the different companies to get them, to sell it to them? And how is that working and how is that going to change going forward?
Well, you'll see a lot of these streaming services have first look deals. For example, Netflix has one with Ryan Murphy. Apple TV Plus just signed a first look TV deal with Martin Scorsese last week. So your HBO, Warner Brothers obviously has Christopher Nolan. So what you're seeing is a lot of these streaming services are trying to snatch up content creators, so that way they don't have to deal with these partners shopping around their projects. And so that's really interesting. But sometimes the studios, like for example Sony, unloaded Greyhound, the Tom Hanks submarine thriller, onto Apple TV Plus. So when the filmmakers realized it wasn't going to be coming to theaters anytime soon, they decided to opt out of the theatrical model and shop it around to streaming services, which a lot of the time, a lot of these streamers just pick up content that was dumped by other studios or other television networks.
It's such an interesting industry. So real quickly before we let you go, we have to ask, if someone out there is looking for something to binge, I just finished Yellowstone, what do you recommend?
I do recommend Perry Mason on HBO Max. It's a remake of the popular noir detective crime genre. It starts off a little bit slow, but by about the third or fourth episode, I was all in. It's only 8 episodes. It's quick. It's easy. It's one of the best shows I've seen this summer. So that would be what I would recommend.
Nate Adams, film critic, Rotten Tomatoes, and member of the Detroit Film Critics Society. We thank you so much for being on the Oakland County MegaCast. Before we let you go, though, again, tell people where they can find your information or if they want to listen to your podcast as well.
Yeah, so the Picks and Pans podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor. If you go to my website, theonlycritic.com, there's a little page at the top there that will take you directly to the podcast, as well as you can stay up to date on all my reviews. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at theonlycritic.
Thanks so much. We appreciate having you with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.